Jacob Salem is a master marketer. He's a Christian business leader. He's a great speaker. He's a trainer of speakers. He's got a speaker bureau and a number of different cool things that he does. He's one of the best online marketers I know. He's worked with Ziegler and so many other amazing brands on their marketing. And today, he's my guest to talk about sales. And so if you have a vision of scaling your business and you want to think about it from a sales perspective and get the sales perspective from a great marketer, this is for you. Welcome to the Sales Strategies for Christian Coaches podcast. I'm Justin Janowski, your host. And I remember my first 2 attempts to run a coaching business did not go well. I had 1 client and out of business in 2012. In 2015, 3 clients and out of business. In 2018, I did over $250,000 in revenue my first year. I've done millions of dollars in sales since and have worked with over 1,000 clients. And I'm sharing in this podcast how to do sales and marketing and business growth with integrity. When I didn't know how to do those things, it didn't work. The moment I did, it did. And that's what this podcast is about for you. Jacob, thanks for joining us.
Honored to be here, my friend. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. We've got really 2 reasons that we're having this conversation. I'm just going to be upfront and transparent with our audience. We're getting together really because we want to record some conversation about sales that may make it into our book. The book I'm writing right now, it's going to be coming out this summer, called Sales is Love. And I said, man, if we've got Jacob Salem on the line, we better share this with everybody and just give people some insights around sales. I'd love it if you shared your journey around sales specifically.
Yeah, well, they say nothing happens in a business until a sale is made. And I think that's correct, right? You can sell your way out of every problem. And if you're not actually generating sales in your business, you don't have a business, you have a hobby. And those are all things that I hold dear to my heart. One of the core reasons we have been so abundantly successful over the course of the last 12 years is partly because I'm a relentless action taker, which essentially means if somebody drops some golden nugget, and maybe somebody will hear something we say today, drops a golden nugget, and I ever hear it, I pick up that golden nugget and I do something with it immediately.
Nice.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You live, you learn, you move forward. And so I'm a relentless action taker. And then the second reason we have been so abundantly successful is I love sales. I love finding and solving problems for humans. And nothing happens in a business till a sale is made, right? And money changes hands when problems are solved. And so if you can solve a problem for another human being, regardless of the industry, regardless of the niche, that is where sales happen, is identifying the problem for your prospect and effectively communicating to that prospect that you can solve their problem, that you can and will change their life. That then is when the sale is made.
You're a relentless action taker. I know that to be true. I've read your book. How can people find your book, by the way? They're like, man, I like this guy already. I want more. How can they find
Amazon, baby. Amazon's the best place to do it. We're going to be having actually a version 2 coming out here shortly, just an edited version of it. And then my commitment on the podcast, you heard it here first, is I have to get the Audible version of that book out. And so in Q2 of 2026, putting it down on the whiteboard in front of me here that we got to get the Audible version of that so people can listen to it. I love that book. I'm proud of that book. And as I've listened or read it myself and listened to the feedback from the book, there's some minor edits I can make, grammatical edits, and then also ways to improve it. But I'm so proud of that book. Speaker Millionaire Secrets teaches people how I made $15 million through speaking, coaching, and selling online courses. And so if they want to learn how to generate revenue through speaking, coaching, and selling online courses, I believe it's the #1 book out there.
Speaker Millionaire Secrets. You can get it on Amazon. And what's amazing about the book is it tells your kind of rags to riches story. And you were like really, you had one story in there that's always just resonated with me and made me laugh, that you were literally sending like the check to the heating company for the electric bill and stuff like that, so you could buy yourself a little extra time. What happened there?
Yeah, so that was in the very, very early days, and we're broke as a joke. And so in the home that I was renting, I would literally on purpose, I would mail the electric bill to the heating company or to the gas company, and the gas company the electric bill, and then, oh, I'm so sorry, I mailed it to the wrong place, and I'll get you another check in the mail, just to buy myself a couple extra days, and that worked a time or two.
So now you're running a 7-figure business, but you started like so many entrepreneurs. You were just trying to make it financially. You said that you love sales, and so do I. And we're 2 of the rare people who love sales. I think people who love sales generally do really well. And so one of the goals of the book and one of the goals of this podcast and the work that I do is to get people to a place where they love sales. Do you remember a time before you loved sales where it felt hard, where it felt scary, or did you just like it from the beginning?
I've liked it from the beginning. And things you don't know about me would be I've actually sold 2 companies in my life. The first company I ever sold was On Call Lawn Care, which was a lawn mowing service. And I was in love with sales then. I studied the psychology of human behavior. And so this is where like sales, loving sales, it doesn't matter your industry, whether it's high ticket, mid ticket, low ticket. I knew that typically in a typical home household, that if I was going to be cutting the grass, the man typically is going to be the one making making the decision whether or not they're going to hire me. And so I'd wait for the good time to meet with him personally. I'd walk around his yard. I would compliment his yard. I would make him feel good about hanging out with me. I would show him that we're going to double cut the grass, that we're going to pick up the clippings. And I'd really overextend all of the value that we're going to deliver for him with a job well done. And then also remind him that, hey, I'm saving you also 45 minutes of your life. And I knew if I could do that, that if I could have that deep, long conversation to establish the value that we're going to bring, I
Mhm.
was able to charge more because of those things. Whereas if they made me give them a quote over the phone, I would almost have to lower the quote because I wasn't able to establish value. And so another little pro tip out the gate here is you establish the value with your prospect first, then you can deliver the quote, if you will.
That's right.
I've,
Yeah.
I've always loved sales.
That's right. Yeah, me too. I have too. I sold Cutco knives when I was 18, and it just
There you go.
immediately was fun for me. It was an interesting challenge, an interesting opportunity. I love being compensated for the performance that I had, and
Yeah.
I think building relationships and influence and inviting people and the thrill of not knowing what's going to happen next. All of that made it so fun for me. You talked about making sure that you establish value before you share price. And this is an important part of sales, but it also feels like when you talk about like the lawn care sales that you were doing, you found a way to make it relational rather than transactional. How can people who are listening, who are solopreneurs, maybe they're just getting started, maybe they don't love sales yet, they're scared of it, but they do love building relationships. How can they find a way to make something that feels transactional to them now feel really relational in sales?
Yeah. The first point would be detach yourself from the result. I find a lot of because I have a great sales team now. All these years later, in the companies we're currently scaling, and some of these sales professionals, whether they are a solo entrepreneur getting started, as you said, or even just a sales professional, they want the sale, right? They need the sale, and you can almost feel the commission breath as they speak. And so the first thing to that solopreneur is we need sales. We need to pay the light bill at the end of the month. We need the customers to be able to do that. But you have to detach yourself from the result and then begin focusing on the human.
Mm,
Justin, you and I both know the quote, and I love the quote, and I'm sure you do too, from Zig Ziglar that says, you can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want. And sales is no different. It's establishing what does this prospect, what does this person, what does this human need, and can I solve and can need.
mm,
And if they'll reframe their mind to say, I don't care whether I get the sale or not, even though you do care. It's one of the hardest things to do is like, I want the sale.
yeah,
Like, I need you to sign this contract. I need those 16 digits, right, from your credit card. And it's like, if you can detach yourself and remove that from the equation, like, I don't care whether I get the sale or not. I care whether or not I can serve this human and meet their need. And then you just start asking the right questions to that person to establish what is their need and then show the solution. It makes everything so much easier. Just truly love that person where they are, establish whether or not you are the solution. And if you're not the solution, that's okay because some will, some won't. So what next? One
yeah.
of my best sales philosophies, which is probably already written in your book somewhere. Some will, some won't. So what next?
Mm. So good. It's so good. And it's true that we want to make sales, we want to grow our business, we want to help people. And when we're desperate or we're seeking the sale or people can feel that we want it too much for ourselves, it's repelling.
That's
And
right.
when we are abundant and we don't need anything from the other person, and there's an abundant, generous invitation to work together when we found an
Right.
opportunity, it's really easy for the right people to say yes. And it's really attracting. One of my first mentors, my first coach I ever hired, Hal Elrod, used to tell people to be absolutely committed to the action while being emotionally unattached to the results. And like you
Yeah.
said, this is easier said than done. And the moment we can do that, be absolutely committed to serving on this call, absolutely committed to doing everything we can to make it easy for the right person to say yes, absolutely committed to inviting in a way that serves the other person, but be emotionally unattached to the results, then it becomes easy for people to say yes. Sales becomes a
Right.
lot more fun. And I think one of the things that people are struggling with is they attach their own value and their own worth to yes or no.
Yeah.
They attach too much emotionally to yes or no. And that's why it feels like rejection when people say no. But if we unattach ourselves emotionally to the result and we separate ourselves from the other person and their decision making process to a certain degree, I think we can feel better. How have you been able to? I know this about you because it's the same thing for me. Every person who's ever been great at sales, every person who's ever built a successful business has heard no thousands of times. How do
Yeah.
you hear no? And how have you heard no over the last, now you're hearing it no less often because you're a little bit removed from the sales process. But how did
Yeah.
you make it through thousands of no's without ever feeling rejected or like your own value was attached to it as you got all the yeses as well?
So I want to answer it from two industries because you serve, and forgive me if I'm wrong, you serve coaches, right?
Yes.
Is hard to impossible to hear no as a coach and not take it personally for two lanes. One is you genuinely, truly, if you're a good coach, believe that you can change that person's life. And you hear them saying no to themselves, and then you also hear them saying no to you. You're also having them reject you personally, and that is really, really hard to hear or bear. And so I almost want them to write that down, right? The some will, some won't, so what next? You have to live by that mantra, and you have to be able to go from one rejection to the next rejection with no lack of enthusiasm, keeping a smile on your face when you get onto that next call, because the next call doesn't know how the last call went, whether that's booked on your calendar or whether that's cold call. You almost just have to do it. It's a mindset. It's right. It's like when we're beat down and we're tore up as men or women, we do it anyway. And you just have to do it. But I do understand. And so I want to give weight to
Mhm.
those coaches who are listening that it is hard. You are literally selling yourself, and it's hard to hear it. And so that's where you get a good coach like Justin in your life. You get someone around you who can support you, encourage you, and remind you of your value. Because if you have 8 book calls on your calendar and you go 8 for 8 of 0 sales, that makes for a really bad day. And you want to have somebody who can uplift you, who can encourage you, who can remind you that this isn't the end and that you can step forward.
Yeah.
Now, in other industries where you're selling somebody else's product or somebody else's service, it gets a little bit easier, or even comparably, I would say it's a lot easier. When you're selling somebody else's product, it's, you didn't create the product typically. And also, it may or may not be a good fit. And actually, as I say that, I almost want to circle back to the coach side of things. You may not be the right fit for that person right then, and that is okay. As long as you, in the sales process, regardless of the product or service you're offering, are truly identifying that person's need, it's okay if you're not the right fit. We can't serve everybody. Listen, even Jesus didn't close everybody. And so if Jesus couldn't close 100% of the humans, we can't expect to either. And I think if I could almost end that paragraph there, it'd be pretty powerful.
Yeah, that is powerful. That's a really important share. Thank you for that. And it's the reminder. What I love about what Jacob's sharing here is it's just part of the process. There's no way to avoid it. And so we have to decide if you're a coach, an entrepreneur, a Christian leader right now who's deciding that you're going to pursue clients, you're going to pursue sales conversations, you're going to build a business, you just have to accept the reality that no is a part of the process. And it's an important part of the process to yes. If we want to hear yes, we want to work with our clients, we want to build our business, we want to have success, we just have to accept the reality that we're going to have to hear no. We're going to have to persist through
That's right.
that. Even Jesus heard no and hears no today, right? And
That's
that's
right.
the reality of sales and influence and leadership is it's part of the process. And if you're not willing to accept that part of the process, the truth is you're not going to make it.
That's
And you
right.
might decide that being an entrepreneur or being a salesperson isn't for you. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to be a coach, your job is actually to make sales first so that you can serve your clients. And you just have to accept that part of the job. One of the things that helps me is just surrendering it to God and just trusting that, like, when they're right for me, I'm right for them, and it's the
That's
right
right.
time, they're going to say yes. And if they're not a yes right now, it just wasn't a right fit yet. And I'm just going to surrender that to God and trust Him in that. Can you share any specific stories from sales calls or certain parts of the sales process that really work for you or resonate with you?
Yeah, I want to go into a sales process with the time that we have. And a shout out of a guy that you, if you don't know him, might want to reach out to him. His name is Brian Flanagan. Are you familiar with that name, Justin?
I don't know if I know Brian. No.
So Brian was deeply affiliated inside of the Zig Ziglar Corporation back in the day. And Brian, if you listen to this, my apologies. He's in his upper 80s these days. So if I guessed that wrong, Brian, my bad. He's been around the block, right? He knows a thing or two because he's seen a thing or two. He wrote a book called You're New to Sales. And in that book, I learned my favorite sales process that I think is wise for this podcast. And Justin, even to add a segment to your book, whether it's quoted by me or quoted by Brian Flanagan, his sales process is the number one sales process I use every time I do almost anything in life now, not even just sales. I use it in negotiation with my kids, all right? Where it's the acronym essentially is POGO. And so the sales process that I use in every single conversation is POGO, POGO. And to break the acronym down, I start the conversation by asking about the person. I start asking them questions about themselves, what their wants are, what their needs are. I start learning questions about O, which is their organization. And depending on what you're selling, that could be about their business, that could be about their family, depends on what organization you're talking about. But it's person, organization, goals. What are the end goals? What are the outcomes that they're looking for? And this applies to all industries, all areas of life. What are their goals? And then the O is their obstacles. What's stopping them? What is stopping them from achieving their goals? And I've learned that if I can work through that sales process, it takes me 20 to 30 minutes to work through it well and effectively. I can learn everything I need to know about that person to determine a couple of things. The first is, and if you're in sales, you need to actually figure out if you are the true answer to that prospect's problem and remove the ego and actually understand that we are not the solution to everybody's problem. In the speaking space, I see it every single day. In the coaching space, I see it every single day, where just because I have the gift of gab doesn't mean that I am the solution to that event host problem. And just because I'm a great life coach or a great business coach, it doesn't mean I'm the solution to every other business person's problem. And so we're using that equation to figure out first, are you the solution to the person's problem? And then if you are the solution to the person's problem, you can leverage everything in the person, organization, goals, and obstacles, especially the obstacles, to have the conversation needed to move them from the I'm not interested decision to the I can't move on without Jacob Salem decision by just simply asking good, open-ended questions in every category of POGO: person, organization, goals, obstacle, in that chronological order. And then also, I want to elaborate on open-ended questions. For those that don't know what that is, it's essentially I'm trying to ask a question to get the prospect to start talking. In my brain, I'm doing everything I can to not ask a yes or no question. Because as soon as you ask the yes or no question, they answer the question and now you're stuck. I want to get them talking. I want to get their emotions going. I want to get their juices flowing, if you will. And so I'm asking open-ended questions about themselves, their organization, their goals, and then what's stopping them. And then if I can help them achieve their life dreams, their business goals, I'll make an offer.
Absolutely. I love that. Deep, meaningful questions, open ended questions, real conversations. POGO, person, organization, goals, and obstacles. For us, the person and organization's happening in discovery, goals is vision, obstacles is the gap. So if you're following our 10-step sales processes, fits in really well. I love that. POGO. Thanks for sharing that, Jacob. Jacob, you're awesome. I appreciate you, brother, for taking the time with us today
Absolutely.
and serving everybody here. If you're not yet following Jacob Salem on social media, you need to, especially if you are a speaker, you want to be a speaker, you want to be an online marketer, you want to sell courses. He's doing so many cool things. Follow Jacob Salem all over social media. Grab his book, Speaker Millionaire Secrets. Jacob, any final words?
Honored to be here, my friend. Justin, you're an amazing coach, an amazing man. And publicly to say it, I put it actually when I booked it. I can see and I believe that God is doing an amazing work in you and through you because of your willingness to follow his call in your life and to serve so many people in this world. So, Justin, thank you for what you're doing and for all those that you are serving.
Amen. Thank you so much, my friend. Talk to you soon. Cheers, everyone. See you next week.